They said we were children. That's what the Galactic Council called us when they first welcomed Earth into their shining empire of stars. Children. Curious, chaotic, clever, but ultimately harmless. We were their pet project. The youngest species to join their sacred fold. So young, in fact, they didn't even bother to offer us a vote. No power, no say. Just smiles, data sharing, and treaties written in a dozen languages we didn't understand. At first, we were grateful, overwhelmed by the gift of knowledge. Hyperspace lanes, gravity tech, medical nanites that eradicated cancer in a week. These were miracles. To us, the Council was salvation. But we were naive, desperate, blind to the way their eyes never truly saw us as equals. And then came the war. It wasn't ours. It started in the outer belt, between the Ralveth and the Drell. Two ancient species with 1,000 years of hate between them. Their blood feud reignited, and suddenly stars were going dark, worlds burning, refugees flooding every sector, and Earth was asked to help. We did. Against every warning, we stepped in. Not with fleets or firepower, we didn't have much then, but with resolve, with stubbornness, with that damnable human thing the Council never understood. Sacrifice. Our diplomats brokered ceasefires. Our medics tended to Drell and Ralveth alike. Our freighters delivered aid through contested war zones, shields barely holding. And when things escalated, when the war spilled into the core systems and the Council's own planets were threatened, we sent our fleets. Not because we were asked, not because we were ready, but because no one else would. We lost half our navy in the opening month. But the Council survived. Because of us. And when it was over, when the Drell homeworld was glassed and the Ralveth were shattered into diaspora, we didn't ask for praise, not even reparations. We asked for a seat, not as children, not as guests, as equals. The vote was held in secret. We only found out the result when the broadcast leaked 2 weeks later. A unanimous decision, 12 races, 12 votes. Earth denied. Not enough cultural maturity, they said. Too impulsive, too emotional, too dangerous. Dangerous. That word lit a fuse in every heart back home. They used us, let us bleed for them, die for them. And when the war was done and the galaxy was safe again, they tossed us back to the kiddie table. I remember the riots, cities erupting not just in anger, but grief. Parents screamed into empty skies for the sons and daughters who wouldn't come home. Veterans burned their uniforms in the streets. And amidst it all, one message echoed louder than all the rest. Never again. The shift happened slowly, at first. Budget reallocations, quiet construction yards in Mars' orbit, dark projects resurrected beneath Luna's surface. The Council watched, of course. They always did. But they underestimated how good we'd become at hiding things. They thought our rage would fade. They thought wrong. The man watching the Council's broadcast in a dim, war-scarred room knew exactly how wrong they were. General Torin Vex didn't blink as the Council's High Arbiter droned on in that oily, patronizing tone. Speaking of galactic harmony and necessary containment protocols. His knuckles tightened around the glass in his hand. Bourbon, imported from Earth. The last batch, probably. The blockade had seen to that. Containment, huh? They'd sealed Earth behind trade walls, sanctioned every human-aligned colony, and declared us a developmental threat to interstellar peace. To hell with them. Behind Torin, the holomap of the sector glowed red. Human fleets, once scattered and underpowered, were now moving in calculated silence. Tight formations, black ops squadrons, weapons that had never seen the light of day. He turned as a younger officer entered the room. "Sir, transmission from the Titan. Admiral Reyes confirms position at Enceladus. All ships cloaked and ready." Torin nodded. "And the signal?" Prepped. Send it. The officer hesitated. That's a point of no return, sir. Torin stared at the screen again. The council chamber filled with smug, scaled, feathered faces. They crossed that point when they betrayed us, he said. Let's show them what dangerous really means. The officer saluted, turned, and vanished into the corridor. And far across the void, a dozen human ships powered up weapons no council species had ever seen. Technology born not from peace, but from rage, from betrayal, from the promise that humanity would never be someone else's pawn again. There was a time when humanity dreamed of the stars with wide-eyed wonder. That time was over. Enceladus was silent beneath its icy shell. The council knew little about what lay beneath that frost, only that it was one of Saturn's moons, and of minor strategic value. That ignorance had been carefully cultivated over years. While the galaxy dismissed Earth as emotionally unstable and technologically erratic, humanity had been repurposing forgotten corners of its system into war factories and listening posts. Admiral Reyes stood aboard the ISS Titan, a dreadnought-class ship designed in secret, forged in the cold crucible of betrayal. Its hull shimmered with grav reflective plating, a human invention the Council had called theoretical nonsense. And yet here it was, real, cloaked, and armed with weapons calibrated to dismantle Council shielding algorithms. "Signal sent," came the voice of her tactical officer, softly, reverently. Reyes didn't smile. She simply looked at the holofeed. The Council was still talking, still unaware. "This isn't a declaration of war," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It's the consequence of arrogance." Around her, her crew stood silent. Each one had lost someone, a sibling, a parent, a lover. None of them served out of duty anymore. They served out of memory. They served because the Council had looked them in the eyes and called their sacrifice a mistake. Engines igniting, weapons warming. She gave the order with no hesitation. "Fire!" 3 Council ships blinked off the galactic grid in less than 6 seconds. No warning, no demands, no ceremony, just erasure. The explosion was felt in every system relay. Alarms blared across Council stations. The High Arbiter's speech was cut short by distant sirens and sudden chaos. On Earth, the footage hit within minutes, and instead of fear, it brought something different. A release. Screens across the globe lit up with breaking headlines. "Humanity strikes back. No more chains. The first salvo." Some cheered. Others wept. But no one was silent. The Council convened an emergency summit within the hour. 12 species, 12 voices shouting over one another, accusations, demands, panic. They activated the peacekeepers, called in the elder fleets. But it was too late for control. The myth had shattered. The myth that humans could be tamed. Back on Earth, buried under the old mountain ranges of Colorado, the real war room thrummed with energy. General Torin Vex watched the chaos unfold on the main screen, arms crossed, face stone. "We shouldn't have waited this long," said Director Nyla Varin, head of the Interstellar Intelligence Network. Her voice was sharp, brittle with years of bitterness. "We gave them everything, Torin. They spat in our face and called it diplomacy." "We weren't ready," Torin replied quietly. "We are now." He didn't deny it. The Council had relied too long on a single assumption, that humans were fractured, unpredictable, emotional. They were right. But what they never understood was that emotion doesn't make us weak. It makes us relentless. Out in the frontier systems, humanity's hidden allies emerged. Colonies once claimed as rogue outposts were now beacons of resistance. Old Council client species, oppressed, overlooked, began to whisper of rebellion. They remembered the humans who'd fought for them during the war, the medics who crossed fire lines, the engineers who rebuilt what the Council refused to touch. And now, humanity had become something more than a species, a symbol, not of peace, not of order, but of reckoning. The Council responded the only way they knew how, with fear. A blockade around Sol, sanctions that froze trade, seized assets, imprisoned human ambassadors, and then came the ultimatum: disarm or face annihilation. The message came encoded in a format from Earth's first year in the Council, like a slap across the face. Torin read the text once, then deleted it. "Tell them," he said to the comms officer, "that we already faced annihilation, and we survived. And if they don't listen," Torin met her gaze, "then they'll learn something new." In a distant corridor of Council space, a fleet of unmarked ships exited slipspace. Their IDs didn't register. Their tech didn't match any known configuration, because it wasn't Council-made. It was human, built in secret, fueled by anger. Crew trained in simulations based on the Council's own war logs, leaked, stolen, decrypted over years of watching and waiting. The lead ship sent a message to the Council defense array guarding the outer ring. "We remember your betrayal." And then the array exploded. The galaxy had thought humans were impulsive, but the truth was far worse. Humans were patient. They didn't just want war. They wanted the Council to feel it, the way they had felt forgotten, dismissed, and used. And the rage? It had only just begun. The Council still didn't understand. Even after the outer defense ring fell, even after 3 colonies defected overnight, even after their fleets encountered human vessels with cloaking fields that shouldn't exist, and weapons that burned through shields like paper. They didn't understand. Because the Council had never been afraid before. They had crushed rebellions, quelled insurgents, silenced dissent. But they had never fought an enemy who knew them. That was humanity's secret weapon. Not the tech, not the ships, the memory. We had studied them. All of them. Every tactical doctrine, every psychological weakness, every ego-driven blind spot. For decades we played nice, nodding along, pretending to be grateful. All while recording, analyzing, preparing. The betrayal had simply accelerated the clock. And now, the galaxy was burning with the knowledge that the smallest child at the table had teeth. Deep inside the Archeon Spire, Council headquarters on the core world of Verith, the High Arbiter watched the reports scroll in with growing horror. Unknown vessels near the Tracian moons. Refinery destroyed in the Urian system. Council patrol fleet obliterated. No survivors. He had never seen the Council chambers so quiet. The Drell ambassador was shaking, translucent fingers tapping against his armrest. "This is not war, it's execution." "They've hacked our long-range comms," said the Vael Shari representative, her tone trembling. "They're intercepting fleet orders before we even give them." "It's impossible," someone muttered. But it wasn't. Because for the first time, the Council wasn't fighting a fringe uprising. They were fighting humanity with a plan. On the bridge of the ISS Titan, Admiral Reyes stared at a star map that was no longer theoretical. Each marked point had been a Council foothold a week ago. Now those systems were silent, occupied, or ash. She traced a gloved finger across the next target. "This one hurts," she muttered. "Borealis Station." Her XO, Captain Hurst, raised an eyebrow. "Old science outpost?" Number It was where they signed the treaty, the one that made us a protectorate instead of a partner. Hurst nodded slowly. Symbolic strike, then. Reyes clenched her jaw. Number It's a message. And she gave the order. Back on Earth, protests had turned to parades. Humanity wasn't hiding anymore. Monuments were going up, names etched into obsidian slabs, lit by eternal fire. Not generals, not leaders, fallen medics, aid workers, young soldiers who volunteered for peacekeeping and came home in boxes while the council smiled and said nothing. General Torin Vex stood at the base of the newest memorial, flanked by diplomats and former colonists. His face was tired, grizzled, and lined with the weight of a war that wasn't declared, but had always been coming. A reporter pushed through the crowd. "General, how far will humanity go?" He looked her in the eye. "As far as they made us." In the shadows beyond the galactic rim, not every species was mourning the Council's fall. The Ashari Syndicate, black market kings of the void, watched from their asteroid fortresses, amused. "About damn time," they said. The Grith, nomads scattered across unclaimed space, whispered tales around their campfires of Earth's burning rage, and smiled. Finally, someone was standing up to the gods, and within the ranks of the Council itself, cracks began to form. A junior delegate from the Ralveth Confederacy leaked confidential documents, proof that Earth had been sabotaged during the war, that their fleets were sent into unwinnable battles to shield Council worlds, that their losses were intentional. The file went viral. The galaxy turned. Torin Vex sat alone in his office when the news hit. He didn't cheer, didn't smirk. He just closed his eyes. "They're finally seeing it," said a voice behind him. It was Nyla Varen, the spy master. "They're seeing what we saw," Torin said. "Too late." Nyla stepped forward, dropping a fresh report on his desk. "The Borealis strike succeeded. Council has pulled back from the inner belt. They're rattled, starting to eat their own." He looked up. "And?" She hesitated. "They're calling for a peace summit." Silence. Then Torin laughed, short, bitter. "Now they want to talk." But humanity wasn't the same species that had begged for a seat at the table. Now, we built our own table, out of steel, blood, and memory. And if the Council wanted peace, they'd have to sit at our table. And listen. Really listen. To every scream, every cry, every voice they silenced when they thought we were nothing. Because this wasn't just vengeance, it was justice, and we had only just begun collecting the debt. The Peace Summit was held in the Caltheris Drift, a dead zone in neutral space, far from any Council stronghold or human fleet. It was symbolic, a place without allegiance, a void untouched by blood or banners. A fitting grave for old illusions. The Council sent 7 envoys, not 12, not even 10. Some had gone silent. Others were too afraid to leave their fortified systems. And of course, Earth sent no one. Not at first. For 3 days, the Council envoys waited, postured, issued empty communiques laced with diplomatic poetry and veiled threats. And then, on the 4th day, the lights dimmed across the drift. One by one, the stars around the station flickered. Not out of failure. Cloaking fields. Dozens of human ships emerged from the black like ghosts, surrounding the station in complete silence. No weapons charged, no shots fired. But the message was clear. We see you. We're here. You're not in control. They arrived aboard a single cruiser. The Resolve, sleek and scarred, its hull bearing the emblems of every human faction, military, civilian, colonial. At its helm was a woman the galaxy hadn't seen before, Ambassador Helena Voss, young, quiet, deadly calm. She wore no insignia, no medals, just black, a memorial in motion. When she entered the council chamber, no guards stopped her. They didn't dare. She sat, folded her hands, and waited. The silence was suffocating. The High Arbiter, voice shaky, finally spoke. Ambassador Voss, we are grateful for your presence. Her gaze was ice. No, you're afraid of it. Humanity has made its anger clear. But if we are to avoid further bloodshed, you mean your blood. He hesitated, She leaned forward. Let's be honest, shall we? You didn't come here to make peace. You came to beg for control. You want to leash us again. Wrap your decrees in flowery language and call it order. But it's too late for that. Humanity's actions threaten galactic stability. You mean your stability? The room was still. The other envoys didn't speak. Some looked away. You called us children, she whispered. But the truth is, you never wanted us to grow, because you knew what would happen when we did. She stood. Now you're living it. The summit collapsed within the hour. No treaty, no agreement, only fear. And in the shadows of the drift, as the resolve departed, a message pinged across secure council channels, not from Helena, from Earth, encrypted, final. You don't get to erase what we remember. You don't get to define who we become. Elsewhere, the war deepened. Council strongholds were overwhelmed not just by human fleets, but by defections. Whole battalions of lesser species, once loyal to the Council, now changed sides. They fought under a new banner, the Terran Accord. Not just humans, not anymore. It was an alliance of the betrayed. And the Council? It fractured. The Kelton withdrew entirely, citing internal unrest. The Ralveth signed a non-aggression pact with the Accord. And the Veilshari leadership? Assassinated from within. A new faction rose, waving the Terran sigil in their cities. The Council's power wasn't just waning, it was collapsing. But victory breeds its own poison. General Torin Vex sat in his war room, staring at casualty reports. Not Council losses, ours. A failed assault on Arva Prime. Civilian deaths, entire colonies destabilized. Some humans, drunk on vengeance, had gone too far. Rogue captains, vigilante fleets. They weren't fighting for justice anymore. They were hunting. Torin turned to Nyla Varen, her face grim. We're losing control of our own people, she nodded. Some don't want justice, they want dominance. He stood slowly, spine heavy with guilt. That's not what we started. But it might be what we become. And far across the galaxy, in a chamber sealed in shadow, a new council formed. Not of the old guard, not of the cowards and opportunists, but of something worse. The survivors, the manipulators, the ones who had always seen humans as a threat, and now had the proof to rally others behind that fear. They began to plan. And this time, it wouldn't be containment. It would be eradication. Humanity had always feared the dark. Now it had become it. The Terran Accord was spreading faster than anyone expected. Not through conquest, at least not at first. Through hope, through whispers carried across trade routes and pirate bands, through smugglers and refugees and broken soldiers. Worlds that had once feared Earth now looked to it as a salvation from the rot. But not everyone in the Accord believed in mercy. Captain Juno Thane of the rogue vessel Crucible didn't care for treaties or codes. She'd lost her sister at the Battle of Garl, ordered to hold position as a council fleet, mistakenly opened fire. They called it miscommunication. She called it a massacre. And now she was done waiting for permission. The Crucible had raised 3 former council outposts in the last week. No survivors, no prisoners. Torin Vex had sent recall orders. Juno ignored them. The Accord's signal didn't reach her anymore, because the deeper this war went, the more it fractured. Some wanted justice, others wanted revenge, and only blood would satisfy them. Admiral Reyes watched the internal briefing in silence. Rogue captains, civilian casualties, retaliations spiraling out of control. She had once believed in clarity. Now the line between right and wrong was buried under ashes. "We're turning into them," whispered her XO. Reyes shook her head, slow. They never felt remorse. We still do. Do we? He asked. The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. Back in the drift, Helena Voss received a secret message from a place that shouldn't have existed anymore. Galen Prime. A council black site, one humanity believed destroyed in the Betrayal, but someone had survived. And what they sent changed everything. Video logs, recordings, genetic samples, proof that the council hadn't just lied about the war, they'd used humanity, modified human test subjects, experimental neural control implants, forced indoctrinations, programs to reshape the human mind, to make us more compliant, more malleable. When Earth's diplomats asked about the missing soldiers, they were told classified lost data. But they weren't lost. They were taken. And most never came back. The Council hadn't feared human instability. They had engineered it. When Torin saw the files, he didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, he stood, walked into his private quarters, and sat down in the dark. He had given 30 years to peace, believed in diplomacy, in second chances. But this was something else. This was unforgivable. And now? Now he finally understood why the rage had boiled so deep for so long. Because it wasn't just betrayal, it was violation. The leak hit the galaxy in waves. Helena made sure of it. Hacked council archives, broadcast relays, viral bursts. The truth went everywhere at once. And when the people of the galaxy saw it, when they saw what the council had done to humanity, to its soldiers, to its children, they didn't just condemn it. They rebelled. Council stations were overrun by their own populations. Riots on Terran 9th. Military collapse in the Perda Nexus. Colonies declaring independence not in solidarity, but in shame, refusing to serve a regime that had committed such horrors. The old council was dead, but in its place, a new evil stirred. From the ruins of the shattered core worlds, a single figure emerged. Kareth Zor, former head of security intelligence, now self-declared executor of preservation. He wore no robes, no ceremonial garb, just a steel uniform and a cold smile. The humans, he said in his first broadcast, have exposed a crime. But make no mistake, they are not innocent. They were created to be unstable, to fracture, to burn. He raised his hand, mechanical and gleaming. They are a threat to all, not because of what we did, but because of what they are. His message ended with a single phrase, burned into every major system. Extinction is not vengeance, it is insurance. The executor wasn't rebuilding the council. He was building a war machine, all or nothing, no treaties, no lines drawn, no humans left standing. And so the tide turned again. Humanity, fractured and furious, now faced a monster it had helped create. The accord was vast, but it wasn't united. And Earth, aching, angry, afraid, stood at a crossroads. Were they still fighting for justice, or were they now just fighting to survive? Because what had started as retribution was becoming something darker. Rain fell over New Kyoto like memory, cold, endless, and heavy. Torin Vex stood under it without an umbrella. The bronze memorial wall before him shimmered with water, the names running like ink in the storm. But they weren't fading. They never would. He reached out, touched one, Ensign Kira Vex, his daughter, disappeared during a joint training operation. One of thousands the council had marked as MIA. Now he knew better. She'd been taken. Used. He hadn't cried when the war started, but he cried now, silently, as the names stared back at him. Because the war was no longer about betrayal. It was about what came next. Behind him, Nyla Varen waited in the rain. "We have a problem," she said softly. He wiped his face. "Just one?" She handed him a datapad. Her eyes didn't leave his. One of the subjects from Galen Prime came back. They called her Vex now, They didn't know her real name. She didn't remember it. But her blood was human. And her body? Altered. Council tech fused with experimental bio-weaving, a living weapon, created in silence, designed to be obedient. But she wasn't. Not anymore. They found her on a derelict freighter, drifting beyond the Lurian wastes. Every bone in her body had been broken and reknit. Her nervous system? Augmented to the edge of collapse. And her mind was a battlefield. Sometimes she screamed in languages she didn't know. Other times, she recited council command codes in perfect cadence, as if she'd never left their labs. But mostly, she stayed quiet. Watching. Waiting. Vex was brought to a secure Accord facility in orbit around Titanus. Dr. Arlen Greaves, Earth's leading cyber neural specialist, took one look at her and nearly collapsed. They didn't just program her, he whispered. They layered her. She could be calm one moment, savage the next, memories overwritten, reflexes that responded before thought. She was a ghost of 1,000 erased soldiers. But when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, fragile. Do I belong to anyone? Torin watched from behind the glass. No, he said softly. Not anymore. Word of Vex's return spread fast. Some hailed her as a miracle, proof that those lost could be reclaimed. Others called her a weapon, dangerous, unstable, a council sleeper cell waiting to snap. Captain Juno Thane sent a message to Torin directly. You're risking everything for a ticking time bomb. If she turns, don't expect mercy. Torin didn't respond, but Helena Voss did. She tracked down Juno's vessel in the outer rim, boarded it without permission, and faced the rogue captain, unarmed. You think revenge makes you strong, Helena said. Juno laughed bitterly. I think mercy makes you weak. Number mercy is control. Mercy is knowing you could end them and choosing not to. Juno's eyes narrowed. You keep preaching that, Voss. Let's see if it saves you when the Executor finds Earth. Meanwhile, Kareth Zor, Executor of Preservation, was building his fleet in silence. He didn't need volunteers. He had drones, bio-cloned strike legions, AI fleets stripped of conscience, and something worse. He had found the deep codes, the root genetic fail-safes planted in the first human council hybridization experiments. Fail-safes buried in the DNA of Vex. And maybe thousands more, a hidden signal, a switch. He didn't need to beat humanity. He just had to corrupt it. Back on Earth, Vex began to draw. No one gave her pencils. She made them, carved from broken meal trays and melted wall panels. She drew faces. Dozens of them. Smiling, screaming, some with council eyes, some with human hands curled into fists. When Torin entered her cell, she looked up slowly. They're coming, she whispered. His breath caught. Who? She touched one of the drawings. It was a face he recognized. His daughter. Kira Vex. Alive? Or just a memory woven into the shattered mind of a broken soldier? Either way, the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The image haunted him. Her face, Kira's face, drawn by someone who had never known her. The lines were jagged but unmistakable. The curve of her cheek, the faint scar near her left brow. A detail no records carried, not even the military archives. Only her father would know. Torin Vex had stared at that drawing all night. Now he stared into the cold vacuum of space, the resolve coasting quietly beyond the rings of Titanus. Nyla stood beside him, silent. She'd learned not to ask the obvious questions. Eventually Torin spoke. She's alive. Nyla didn't flinch. Or Vex was programmed to make you believe she is. Same outcome, Torin said, voice low. I have to find her. Deep within the Terran Accord's intelligence division, they traced the origin of the genetic signal Vex responded to. fragments of neural frequencies tucked into old code, buried in planetary emissions. Not just tech, but biology. The source? Carshell's Cradle, a former council facility, off the grid, hidden behind the collapsed Singari Belt, a region so unstable most ships wouldn't risk flying through it. It was a graveyard of lost fleets. But if Kira, or others like her, were there, Torin would risk the hell. Meanwhile, Executor Zor's fleet continued to grow. He didn't recruit, he harvested. Every fallen world left behind biotech hybrids, dead flesh with dormant protocols, corpses that became soldiers, minds overridden by machine logic and deep code council programming. The galaxy whispered a new name for them, the Silenced. Vex felt them in her dreams, their pain, their hunger, their emptiness, and in those dreams, she saw Kira, not in chains, not in pain, but leading them, eyes glowing, voice serene. She wasn't broken, she was in control. Torin led the strike force himself, against every Accord advisor's warnings. Nyla insisted on coming, so did Vex. No one knew why she volunteered. She just looked Torin in the eye and said, "I'll know if she's one of us." The jump through the Singari Belt nearly tore the fleet apart. Only 3 ships made it through. Carshell's Cradle was still there, an obsidian husk floating in the black, half buried in asteroid wreckage. No life signs, no communications, just the signal, pulsing, calling. They entered cautiously. Inside, silence, then whispers, recorded screams, flashes of movement, echoes of memories that didn't belong to them. Vex walked ahead, unfazed. She was remembering. They found the chamber deep in the core, a massive hall lined with stasis pods, hundreds of them. Inside, humans, all altered, not asleep, not dead, suspended. And in the center, hooked into a throne of neural conduits, was Kira Vex. Older, changed. Her eyes opened as Torin stepped forward. She didn't blink. "Father," she said, not with warmth, but with cold, clinical certainty. "Why?" he whispered. She tilted her head. "Because they broke me, and then rebuilt me. But they didn't finish." She rose slowly, metal cables detaching from her spine like shed skin. "I did the rest myself." Torin's voice cracked. "Kira, come with me. We can fix this." She stepped forward. "There's nothing to fix." And behind her, the stasis pods lit up, activating. Nyla reached for her weapon. "It's a trap." "No," Kira said. "It's a resurrection." Vex stepped between them. "I know what they did to you," she said. Kira looked at her, something flickering behind her cold eyes. "Then you know why they all have to fall. They're not all guilty. They're all complicit." Vex hesitated. For the first time, something changed in her posture. Her voice softened. "Then what are we?" For a second, Kira faltered. That was all Torin needed. He stepped forward, placing his hand over hers. "You're still my daughter." Tears welled in his eyes. "You're not a weapon. You're not a prophecy. You're Kira." Her lips parted. But before she could answer, the alarm blared. A message, pulsing from the edge of the system. Zor had found them, and he wasn't alone. The stars burned red. The executor had arrived. His fleet spilled from the void like a plague, thousands of ships, faceless and flawless, formed for a single purpose: extinction. The Silenced led the charge, and at their center was Zor's flagship, a black shard of obsidian that pulsed with the stolen code of 1,000 broken minds. Inside Carshell's Cradle, alarms howled. Torin stood between his daughter and the end of everything. Kira's hand trembled in his. She could feel the signal screaming in her head. The failsafe Zor had designed to rip her will away, to fold her mind back into the machine. The others in stasis pods had already begun to stir, some screaming, others whispering in council tongues long dead. "I can stop them," she said, her voice cracking. "I can shut it down. All of it." Torin searched her eyes. "At what cost?" Kira glanced back at the throne, the cables, the interface built to consume a mind entirely. "I won't survive it," she whispered. Above the station, Nyla and Vex fought side by side in the hangar as the first wave of silence broke through. Vex moved like something half-human, half-nightmare. Silent, swift, efficient. She didn't scream. She didn't bleed. But each enemy she felled brought a flicker of pain to her face. Nyla noticed it. "You're remembering," she said during a lull. Vex nodded, eyes haunted. "Bits and pieces. Flashes. I think I was someone once. Still are." They didn't have time to finish the thought. The hull trembled. Zor's ship had locked weapons. Torin stood before Kira as she connected to the core. "I won't let you die like this," he said, voice cracking. "I already died," she whispered. "Back on that council ship, I only came back because they made me. But now I get to choose what I become." She smiled faintly. "I want to become free." He wanted to pull her back, to hold her like the child she once was. But she was no child. Not anymore. Kira took her place on the throne. Zor's voice echoed across every comm in the system. "You cannot hide behind broken children and ruined ideals. You were made to burn. I'm simply lighting the match." Torin activated the final phase of the Accord's counter-signal, linked to Kira's neural interface. Vex patched in from the hangar, her own mind serving as a stabilizer. The strain showed. Blood trickled from her nose, but she didn't stop. The station shook violently, then silence. Kira's eyes glowed bright white. The signal reversed. Across the fleet of silenced confusion bloomed, a fractured whisper. Memories, faces, music, laughter, grief. The implanted programming cracked. One by one, the silenced began to resist. Not all, but enough. Some ships turned on Zor's command fleet. Others went still, drifting with ghost crews now screaming in confusion. Zor, seeing his machine unravel, gave the final order. "Glass the system. Burn it all." But Kira was faster. She opened the core, flooded every relay with raw signal. The backlash shredded her neurons. Her body seized in the throne, muscles tearing under the force of her own liberation. And then, a flash, a ripple. Every ship within 10 light minutes of Carshell froze. Their power grids fried. Systems failed. Minds broke free, or were silenced permanently. Zor's flagship cracked in half. The executor's face never changed, even as the fire swallowed him. On the surface of the cradle, Torin held his daughter's body. She was limp, but her eyes still faintly glowed. A flicker, a trace, a smile. Then nothing. He didn't cry. He couldn't. There was too much awe in him, too much pride. She had saved them. Not just humanity. Everyone. Weeks later, the Accord met in open council. Worlds once enemies now stood together. Rebuilding would take generations. The scars, longer. But the truth was clear. The age of the council was over. And from the ashes of betrayal, something new had begun. A compact built not on dominance or fear, but on choice. Vex stood at the edge of Earth's orbit, watching the sunrise from the deck of the Resolve. She didn't speak often, but when Nyla joined her, she nodded. "You ever figure out who you were?" Nyla asked. Vex shook her head. "Number, but I know who I want to be." Nyla smiled. "That's more than most." As for Torin, he kept walking, from system to system, spreading Kira's name, her truth, not as a warning, but as a legacy, because humanity's rage had once boiled over, But it was our will that endured, and in the end, it wasn't vengeance that saved us. It was forgiveness.